Okay, hello and welcome to today's event. I'm Jason Gumpert, and I am joined today by a returning speaker for us, Mitch Milam. He's a veteran Dynamics CRM developer, trainer, and author. Mitch is also a multi-year Microsoft MVP, and we're really pleased to have him joining us today, again, to talk about a new topic, Dynamics CRM JavaScript upgrade strategies. So before we begin, I just wanted to take a moment to remind everyone that we just came out of a fairly busy CRM webcast series that ran through the fall and into the winter. All of those sessions are now available on demand on our website. That's msdynamicsworld.com/webcasts to see those recordings. You can also follow us on YouTube to check out the recordings there. We're really building up a great library of content, and we're really happy about that. And looking to the future, we also have a new CRM event series that we're planning for the spring. So in the after convergence U.S. time frame, we're going to have a range of new sessions to feature then. And I wanted to mention it now because I'd like people to just be on the lookout for it. We hope we can attend, and also in case any of you are thinking about adding your voice to the community. We are always looking for new ideas, new case studies, new expertise that you may have developed in recent months, and we would love for you to get in touch with us if you're interested in presenting. You can reach out to me. My email is there in the lower right, jgumpert@msdynamicsworld.com. So let's move on. We do invite you today to add your feedback and ask Mitch questions. You can use the chat block or the Q&A block that you should see to the right of the slides in the webcast session here. And without further delay, I'm happy to hand things over to Mitch.
Hey, Jason. Thanks very much. Hey, can you put that poll up pretty quick?
Yes. Thanks for reminding me. I'll bring that up now.
So before we get started, I thought I would try to get some information about where everybody is and where they're going. So if you look over on the right-hand side of your WebEx there, we've got a couple questions. So I'm kind of curious about where you're going, or sorry, where you are, and then where you're going. So if we could take a few seconds to do the poll, that would be really good, and that way everybody kind of understand where everybody is going from, and that might help us kind of steer the conversation a little bit.
All right, and I see some answers starting to come in. Why don't we give it about 5 more seconds for everyone to fill in their answers, and then we'll bring up the results.
Perfect.
All right, we're going to close that. I think it's going to be about a 10 or 15-second delay here, Mitch, before we can show the results.
Okay.
But, you know, I can actually summarize them. So people who responded, the only selection on the current version was CRM 2011.
Okay.
And responses were pretty well split, actually, between CRM 2013, 2015, and not sure.
Okay, perfect. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Can you see my deck? Is it going?
Yeah, I see your slide.
Okay, great, perfect. Okay, so today we're going to talk about JavaScript conversion strategies. Here's my contact information. I've got about 4 different websites/blogs. My main technical blog is the blogs.infinite-x.net. XRM Coaches is kind of my training site. CRMaccelerators.net is where I host most of my products, and then for users, etc., there's rockmycrm.com. So I just kind of split things out a little bit to kind of make more focus for the readers. So feel free to contact me via Twitter or my email address or any of the blogs. You can always add a comment or send me an email. So we're going to talk about conversion strategies as a general thing, some technical issues that we need to be aware about, some tools that we can use to help, and then at the end we're going to have Q&A. So you know, feel free to ask all the questions you want. We've got an hour and a half. Sometimes it runs short, sometimes it runs long. But hopefully we'll get all your questions answered. Okay, so here is the biggest thing that you have to do for yourself, and it's gotten way more complicated since I originally wrote this thing back in 2012. So we need to create a test environment. So if we're coming from CRM 4.0 going up to the 2011, 13, or 15 environment, the stage you're starting at is going to dictate everything else. So if we're starting with CRM 4.0, we have to upgrade to CRM 2011. If we're starting with 2011, we have to upgrade to 2013. If we are going from 2013 to 2015, we have to have that in mind as well. So what that means is we have to jump one step at a time. Microsoft will only import an organization one step back. So 3.0, if we're going to 4.0, believe it or not, there's still 3.0 out there. If we're going from 4 to 2011, going from 2011 to 13 and 2013 to 15. So right now I am working on a 4.0 to 2013 scenario. So what we did is we created a secondary development server. So what this is a copy of your production environment. And the reason we did this is because a lot of times you need to make changes to clean up or remove things or otherwise clean out the environment before you actually start the upgrade process. So we need a copy of our working environment. Okay, so that's kind of what I was talking about here when I said duplicate your existing CRM 4.0 or whatever CRM environment. So duplicate your environment and then clean it up. You know, there's things like cleaning up the async operation space table, removing solutions that you don't need. You know, we'll get into this a little bit later, but when we get into to some large scale or even medium scale installations, you know, you just don't have CRM. You've got, say, Click Dimensions on top of it or Expert Logics or whatever add-ons that you have. Those need to be kind of handled in a way that will get you to your final goal without causing a problem with the actual upgrade process itself. So virtual machines will save your day here. If you don't have a virtual machine set up, then you might want to get one and learn how it works. Like I've been talking to another partner, and they need to go from 4 to 2015. So as you can see, we're actually going to need 4 servers just to perform the upgrade. Now again, these are throwaway servers for, you know, lack of a better term, except for maybe the 2015. 2015 could actually be a production box. But your timing and your testing, et cetera, are going to have to go through all the stages. So it's very, very important that you kind of have all your hardware laid out before you start. Therefore, you're not doing things over and over again. Okay, this may seem like an extremely strange question, but it has come about that a lot of people are choosing not to upgrade their environments. They are literally starting from scratch. Now, does anybody have any ideas why you would do that? You want to throw that into the Q&A, and we'll see if anybody answers back.
So folks can just add, if they want to try to answer that one, they can just put it in the chat. That would be a great place to.
Yeah, put it in the chat thing there. Or sorry, oh, we got chat too. Okay, oh, there's chat.
Yes, we have chat. It's a good place for just adding comments.
Go. Perfect. Yeah, there's still in the chat. That'll be good.
Yes. I see a couple answers coming in the Q&A.
Yep. Yep. Perfect. Either one. Yeah. So Stephen, excellent. So realistically, if you have CRM 4.0 or even 2011, and you installed it somewhere between 2007 and 2011, the probability of your business being the same today as it was 4 to 7 years ago or 8 years ago in some cases, is going to be small. Okay. Now that's not saying that everybody, you know, doesn't change their business processes, but a lot of times what you learn along the way is a better way of doing things. Maybe your business merged with another business. Maybe you reduced your business. You know, you can think of all the various ways that a business could change. So a lot of times when you get to actually upgrading your CRM system, all that is really important is the data. And even some of that data is kind of marginal at best. You know, back in the day, I can't tell you how many customers, everybody has system administrator access, and if anybody needed the field, they just went and did it. And so that gives you, could be sometimes tens or hundreds of fields on some of your entities that have little or no data in them, things like that. So a lot of companies are choosing to take their current business processes, design the system that matches that, and then what they're doing is they're not upgrading CRM. They're using a data moving tool like a Scribe or the Kingsway Soft SSIS connector, and they're pulling the relevant data out of CRM, the older system, and pushing it into their new current system. So that is an option. This is technically not a JavaScript thing, but why it's important to you is all the code that you had that you worked so hard on that did all the things that you did, you may not need anymore. And especially if you take the route of starting from scratch. So just kind of keep that in mind. Oh, come on, you can do it. There we go. So the first step, which is strategy number 2, is we have to upgrade our object model. So there's a couple things out there. There's a free JavaScript converter that's on CodePlex that does search and replace. It does a pretty good job of getting the basic things out of the way. I sell one that does a more holistic approach. It takes the entire organization and upgrades the whole thing at one time. It's a lot more in depth as far as what it does, because I've kind of gone to great lengths to make sure I understand what I'm converting to, converting from. So, if you got a budgetary constraint, you can start with the free one. If that doesn't work, you can get my tool. Either one works, but realistically, you're going to have something, because you can't just sit there and do search and replace, because it's just not going to work. If you have a few thousand lines of code, or tens of thousands of lines of code, or even a few hundred lines of code, you doing search and replace will slowly but surely drive you crazy, because you're going to have to test all that things out. So you need to find a tool that works for you to do whatever you need to do. So when I look at converting code, I kind of put it into these buckets here. So we have a simple conversion. So that would be something like converting from crmform.all.name.dataValue into XRM page.getAttribute.getValue, things like that. That's pretty simple. Then you get into some of the other things that are a little bit more difficult and tedious, things like the requirement level. And again, most of what we're converting and what we're actually cleaning up, and we'll get into that in just a bit, is we're taking code that we actually created that was unsupported because we didn't have a way to do it, but we had to have it done, things like showing and hiding fields and sections and tabs and things like that. Say the requirement level, they just weren't in the object model, so we had to do that stuff. So some of the things that we did, depending on the technique you used, you have to undo that and convert it to the fully supported thing now. Some of that, like I said, is just tedious because of the different ways that you could do it. Like I mentioned, the requirement level is one that was basically there's 2 or 3 or I think 3, maybe 4 ways of doing it, depending on which one you did. It's a lot of kind of typing, quite honestly. Harder things are things like SOAP calls. So nobody converts SOAP into something new because you almost can't. The model changed too much. It's too hard to figure out how people put their XML together within the JavaScript. Some people use strings. Some people use a big string. Some people used arrays. All these things make it just about impossible to automate any of that process. There are things you can do, like what I use is the XRM Service Toolkit, and I replace all of my SOAP calls with that technology because I can write it in a cleaner, more responsive manner, and it just frees up my development time because I have less code to maintain. So you can cut 100 lines of code down into 10. And anytime you can cut the amount of code that you have to look at down, that's a good thing. Some things are impossible to convert. There are just some techniques that people use that you cannot convert into the CRM 2011 model. I say 2011 model because it really hasn't changed. That was the XRM. That was the introduction of the XRM.page model, and it really hasn't changed since then. They added features to it, new methods and things like that, but it's pretty much the same thing. But some things that existed in 4.0, for instance, the object type code was a property on the CRM form object. That's no longer available at all. So that cannot be replaced. It has to be worked around in some manner. Then you get into the last thing, and I like to call it, what in the hell were they thinking? And that is really a decision was made either by somebody who really knew what they were doing or who didn't know what they were doing, and they wrote a piece of JavaScript that just has to be seen to be believed. So it either works scarily well or it kind of sort of works as long as it's Thursday and you're wearing purple pants. But a lot of these things, you just have to look at the code and like, I don't understand this at all. I need to kind of just cut it out and just start over, okay, things like that. So these are the kind of categories that I put all these things in. And you will find all of these in your code. I don't care if it's code you inherited or code you wrote, you will probably find some of these things. Number 3, use Visual Studio with add-ins. I cannot emphasize enough the value of using Visual Studio to edit your code in. Okay, it has IntelliSense. If you use code add-ins like ReSharper, which is what I use, or Code Rush, which is another one, it will give you additional refactoring to help you rewrite your JavaScript. Once it's in Visual Studio, you can add it to your source control system so that you can make changes without the fear of losing your changes from one version to the other as you go through your rewrite process. The biggest thing that Visual Studio does is, JavaScript has a lot of leeway in how it lets you do things. And a lot of things that are perfectly legal shouldn't, in some cases, actually work. Or you've done things, or somebody did things that are not correct. So Visual Studio will point those out pretty blatantly obvious. So, okay, we've got a problem here with this line of code. Okay, number 4 is to reorganize your functions. So the way that most of us develop things with CRM4, and then it depends on 2011 how you did that, is you had an onload method, and in that onload method you put a lot of functions that you actually used later on in your other methods, your other events. So we would define things like, as you can see here, zip code lookup, more addresses, things like that. Those were all defined within the onload method, and then later on in the onChange or onSave events, they were already in memory so we could have a single copy there. Not everybody did that, by the way, and we'll kind of talk about that in a little bit. But the idea here is you look at the left-hand tree, you'll see that it's indented, that there are functions that are inside of other functions. What you really need to do is you need to pull those things out and flatten that organization. Your onload function needs to have only the code that gets executed in onload. You don't need to have functions inside of the onload function. Okay? Any questions on that part? Okay, so when you move from 4.0 to 2011, it's going to move everything to a web resource. So the way that I like to define things, and this is any of the 20x, 21x versions of CRM, is I like to have one web resource per entity. I like to have a web resource that has any code that relates to buttons on the ribbon in its own web resource. And then I like to have generic or utility web resources for custom code that I create that is not specific to an entity. So, for instance, a format phone number. Everybody has a format phone number field or function. So we would put that into a generic or utility method that says format phone number. We would add that to the form and just call it. Therefore, we only have one copy of it. And then tool-specific things like jQuery or JSON2 or the XM Service Toolkit, like I mentioned, they get their own web resource. Okay. Number 6, code removal. This is where you're going to spend most of your time. So there's lots of things you can do with this. The biggest thing that you're looking for is how did we do it before and how does CRM do it now? So if we had the first one there's talking about importing external JavaScript files, what that specifically is talking about is before the advent of the web resource, a lot of people, including myself, created JavaScript files and we stored them on disk in the ISV folder on the CRM website, so we only had a single copy of our code, so we didn't have code lying everywhere within the system because we didn't have a choice. And we didn't want to, have a huge maintenance nightmare to contend with. So you bring those into CRM. You look for things that have been replaced by internal CRM methods. So code that you may have had that did something spectacular may be already done by CRM using their external.page model. When you first upgrade, there are a lot of empty methods that get created, and basically you just open up your JavaScript file and you'll see a function like, for some reason, like iframes. You'll see an iframe _name_unload, and it's empty. So you can just take that out because it's probably not even referenced anywhere. It's just in the code, so you can take things like that out. So again, the idea is we want to remove as much code as we can because it's going to lessen our maintenance in the future. Okay, strategy number 7 is code consolidation. So depending on how and who wrote your code is probably going to define the structure internally. So since we have web resources above 20 or 2011 and above, we can now have a single code base for a function. So I mentioned the format phone number function. Previously what people would do is for every single entity that they needed that on, they would put that function in the onload event. In some cases, they actually put it in the onChange event of the thing that they were formatting. So there could be that too. But the idea is you want one copy of any function ever. Okay? So it goes back to the other early strategy about creating web resources. You look through all of your code, you find code that you see all over the place all the time, and you create a library on its own of those functions. And then the way you replace them is you cut out the original code, you include on the form that web resource library, and then you call the function like you normally did. So that's what all this is about. So we remove the duplicate functions that we may have, like format phone number. We only need one format phone number function. We put it into a utility web resource. We attach that web resource to the form, and then we can call format phone number from anywhere we need. So another thing you will see, especially coming from 4.0, is you will find a lot of these. If you look on the left-hand side, you will find a lot of what I call single call methods. So in this particular installation, they wanted to make sure that the names and addresses of things in the address were properly capitalized. So basically what they did is they knocked everything to lowercase and then just uppercased everything before or after a space. That's what their methodology was. Well, as you can see, every onChange event just calls capitalized text with a parameter. Well, what we want to do is eliminate all the code on the left. We don't need any of that at all. All we need to do is on our event handler for, say, the address name field, we would just call capitalized text as our function, and in the parameter box at the bottom there, you can see we're passing in false. And then for like address 1, state or province, we're passing in we're using the same function, but our parameter at the bottom would be true. And what this lets us do is actually just eliminate a whole host of code. Okay, so what do you got there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so that's 6 functions we eliminated with one configuration, just one for each field. Okay, does that make sense to everybody? Everybody's nodding their head right now, one way or the other, and I can't see you. Okay, strategy number 9 is to replace SOAP calls. So again, some of the SOAP calls that we used before we may not need anymore. Maybe they were doing something that we have an internal method to work with. Like I said, I used the XRM Service Toolkit for everything, and it's basically a wrapper for the SOAP endpoint and the REST endpoint. So depending if I'm doing a CRUD operation, it will be a REST call. If I'm doing anything else, it's going to be a SOAP call. So again, what I do is I take out all the XML that we used before, and I use a simple call to one of the methods, including in the XRM Service Toolkit. And what that gives me is the ability to actually reduce my code base by quite a lot. Like I said, you could go from 150 or 100 lines down to 10 or less and still have the same functionality. Because again, we don't need to worry about building up this huge XML packet that we get sent off to the server and then handling the results when it comes back. The XRM Service Toolkit does all that for you. So all you're doing is making a call to one of the predefined methods. Again, not only does that give you upgrades to the latest technology, but it also reduces the code you have to maintain by quite a lot. So number 10 is to convert your unsupported code. So again, most of the things I think that we did in 2011 or 4.0 were actually doing things like hiding and showing things. So those are all built in now, setting requirement levels, things like that. Some of the things that were done previously only worked in IE. So if we're doing things that are specific to a browser and we've entered into a multi-browser world, we need to take that into consideration. So we move our unsupported code to supported methods. We look for anything that is specific to a browser, and it's mostly what the deal is there, if you don't know, is the JavaScript that's in Internet Explorer is different than the JavaScript that is in Chrome or Firefox. Everybody added their own extensions to make things happen the way that they wanted them to happen, and what happens is you don't have specific things in certain versions of a browser, either the version of the browser or the browser itself. Okay. Areas of concern that you're going to have to figure out how you want to handle this directly is using the ActiveX components. Again, the main reasons we were using ActiveX was to do SOAP calls, to actually do the XML sending and receiving. Are you using the raw JavaScript events like on-click, double-click, things like that? Are you using those in your code? And if so, why we're using those? Like, for instance, on-click, depending on what version of CRM you were using, as in what update rollup level, a checkbox for a bit field or a two-option field, as they call it now, would behave differently. The ideal thing is when someone checks the box, that is the same as firing the onChange event. Well, it wasn't until a later version of CRM that actually got fixed. It was kind of a design flaw, quite honestly, in my mind. And so what happened is it fell into the same arena as all the other onChange events, which means you had to leave the field. Well, if that checkbox was controlling other screen real estate, as in showing or hiding fields, that was kind of a non-intuitive way of handling it. So what people would do is they would create an actual on-click event, and they would tie it to that field. And as soon as it got clicked, they would fire the on-click, which would then cause other things to happen. So things like this don't work the same, if at all, in 2011. Basically, the XRM.page model is an extraction, and it's fairly high up in the chain. To get to the actual controls, the JavaScript level controls down at the document object model, the DOM, they're pretty far down. You have to know how to get to them, and that is extremely CRM version specific. Okay, which brings us to the next point. Are you doing things directly? Like, for instance, in 4.0, we could only put a field on the form one time. So the way people got around that is either they created multiple fields of varying names and then just had JavaScript to keep them all in sync. That was one technique. Wasted, database real estate, of course. Or what we could do in some cases, if you really knew what you were doing and you didn't mind being kind of scary about it, is you could actually move the field around the form. So how this really happened is if you had a tab system and you had, say, 4 tabs, well, depending on an option that was picked on the first tab, one of the other 3 tabs would be shown. Say the stage, like an opportunity stage, would be selected. So we would be in stage 2, then we would activate stage 2's tab. Well, stage 2's tab had a field from stage 1's tab. So what we would do is we would move it using the JavaScript commands to move things within the DOM, and we would literally take it from one place on the form and put it on another place on the form. Or we'd move it up or down on the same tab, things like that. That just doesn't work with CRM 2011 and above. So you kind of got to watch that. You got to figure out, is there really a reason for doing that? Most of the time where I've seen things like I just described, it is because we needed the field on the form in more than one place. That was fixed with 2011 and above, of course. So we can have the same field on the form more than once. It's the same data value behind the scenes, but you can put multiple controls wherever you want them. And finally, are you using the 2007 SOAP endpoint? So we talked about SOAP a bit ago. The endpoint that we talked with, the 2007 endpoint is for CRM 4.0. And, excuse me, I got a cough. Sorry about that. Can't talk and I drink water. So what happens is, generally, the upgrade practice with the CRM team is they support one level back. So 2011, you can still get to the CRM 4.0 endpoint, which is 2007. And then what happened to that went away. So you need to find any code that is for the CRM 4.0 endpoint and need to upgrade it to the 2011 endpoint so that your other upgrades will work correctly. Okay. So ribbon and the ribbon code, etc. When you upgraded from 4.0, it took all the toolbars that you may have had and it converted them into ribbons, or ribbon tabs or ribbon buttons, things like that. Now, most of the time in 4.0, what we did is we had additional functionality on the toolbar because CRM didn't just provide it. That was just it. Things like adding a phone call or a task to another activity, or sorry, another record. That was very common because that just added a little bit better functionality. It saved the users a couple clicks, and quite honestly, it was just probably the single biggest thing you could do for a user. Like, okay, what are you doing all the time? Let's put a button on the toolbar, and there we go. Well, 2011 they added all that, so you don't need any of that code. So what you do there is you have to go and remove the buttons either before you do the upgrade or after you do the upgrade, either one. With 4.0, it's pretty easy just to modify the XML by hand. When you get to 2011 and above, you're going to have to modify it with things like the ribbon workbench. So again, look at all the code that you could have had with either custom toolbar items or menus and see if they convert over to some functionality within CRM 2011 or above. If not, you're going to have to figure out a way to make them work the way that you want them to work. Again, this is a re-architecture point more than a technical issue, just making sure that that what you see is what you need. Because, like I said, a lot of things we did in the past, we just don't need anymore. Okay, so I'm going to show two slides in a row, and there's going to seem to be conflicting information. They're not. Trust me on this, please. So strategy number 11 is to use configuration versus code. So one of the things that we would do on a very frequent basis was to hide and show tabs, sections, and fields in the onload event of the form. Now, with 2011, we have the ability to automatically show or hide any of those items with a checkbox on the actual properties page of that specific item. That is actually faster than doing it through JavaScript, because what happens is when the form rendering engine reads all the configuration from the XML, it will automatically build that object in memory. Well, if we use it in JavaScript, what it's going to do is it's going to build that object, put it on the form, show it to the user, then run the JavaScript that says take it off the form, which hides it from the user. In some cases, depending on the speed of your network, your CRM, and your user's workstation, they can see this happening. It does not make for a very good user experience. So the easiest way around this is if you find this type of code in the onload event, which means it's going to happen every single time, the best option is just go into the properties of whatever object it is, uncheck the box that says display by default, I think that's what it is, or show by default, and then therefore it will be handled by the configuration of the form rather than your JavaScript. Okay? So strategy 11A, once an A and then a 12, is because there's an option to that called code not configuration. Now, regardless of what I just told you, there are ways that you might want to do other things that are code-bound instead of configuration-bound. So there are two ways to add an on-change and an on-save event. One is through the standard form handler or event handler properties on the form for on-change or on the field for on-change and form for on-save. So that's the one on the left. So as you can see here, we're going to fire the on-phone change field or function, which is the one listed here. Now, this is a generic function. As you can see, I'm using context event context. I'm using a get event source, and what that allows me to do is to actually plug this into any phone number field, execute a function called format phone number, and then set the value of that field back. I don't have anything hard-coded. Everything is coming into my function through the use of the execution context, which is set by this checkbox over on the left that says pass execution context as first parameter. So when that is checked, the function will receive one parameter minimum, and it will have information about the event itself, like what event it was, where it came from. In this case, it's going to be a phone number field of some type. And then using the context.getEventSource is the same as using xrm.page.getAttribute is really and truly what it is. Okay? So this is a generic function tied to a method that's configured. The small piece of code at the bottom underneath the large function there is using a method called add-on-change. So what this one is doing is saying, for the attribute telephone 1, I would like to add an on-change event called onPhoneFieldChange. And this line of code is exactly the same as the configuration box on the left. Okay, you can't see it, but it automatically passes in the execution context as the first parameter. And what this allows you to do is to save a little bit of time for yourself by, say we had 10 phone number fields on the contact, maybe it's probably like 8, I guess. It's faster for me to create 8 lines of JavaScript that match that last line there, rather than going through 8 different fields to configure the properties for the event handler. Okay, the really main drawback to this is in certain cases it doesn't work correctly based on the form creation model, and the only way you're going to know is to try it. If things don't get executed correctly, you're going to have to go back to using the option with the configuration on the left. The other thing is, as you can see with the line of code, there are no parameters to pass. So if you need to pass parameters to your function for things like, remember I showed you on the capitalized text earlier we talked about, we were passing true and false in the white box at the bottom on the left. We don't have that ability with the add-on change method. So whatever your function does has to be able to do it without any other information other than the execution context. Does that make sense? Okay, nobody got any questions?
Mitch, we have a couple of questions that have kind of come in over the last couple slides. So one here, I think this was, I want to say 2 slides back. Is there a tool to update SOAP?
No. Unfortunately, the only tool to update SOAP is the one sitting in front of the computer.
All right, I think that's actually, well, there's another one. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, no, that's fine, go ahead.
There was another question, I think it actually came in quite a bit earlier than I missed, asking if you can move from 2011 to 2015, although I think you may have answered that. Yeah,
as long as you got 2013 in the middle, yes. So again, you can only go one step up at a time. So to go from 2011 to 2015, you'd have to have 2013 in the middle. Yeah, like I said, it's a quite honestly, it's a serious pain in the butt, but you got to do it. So there's just no way around it.
Steven's adding in, is that the tool transformer?
Yes, Steven, that's transformer.
All right, that's it. That's all we have for now.
Okay. Okay. Strategy number 12, refactor, refactor, refactor. I cannot emphasize this enough, okay? You are upgrading your system from something that has been in use for years. Absolutely, positively, take this opportunity to fix all the crap, and there's going to be a lot of it, okay? I don't care who you were, how good you were when you wrote it, you're going to find things you don't need. If you came into a situation, if you are a consultant or you've inherited a system, you could find things that would probably shock you, okay? But now is the time to fix it and make it right, okay? You're spending the time and money to move from one version to the next version. That's not going to be cheap. You know, you're going to have different hardware with different software. You're going to be moving your business processes, possibly rewriting your business processes. Don't skip the fact that you need to review all your code and fix all the things you don't like, okay? Again, a lot of times people are just like, okay, I just need this code upgraded. But the main question you ask yourself is, why do you need it upgraded? The second question is, why do you even need it? Okay, so please don't forget that. Okay, there's been a little bit of talk about this recently as far as Chrome goes, if you've not heard about this. So the JavaScript has a thing called window.open, which is what people, including Dynamics CRM, use to actually open a new window. Well, it turns out that that thing was deprecated or agreed to be deprecated quite some time ago. It's still in use in places, and what happens is, like on the Chrome browser, there's a certain level 37, I think it is, version 37, where that command is not even in there, so it won't work anymore. So if you are using window.open to open either a web resource or another entity form, you need to use the xrm.utility.openEntityForm or open web resource method. And that allows you some extra kind of capabilities. The open entity form is really cool because it allows you to pre-populate fields, which is cool, I think. It's just me, but that's pretty cool. So that's one thing you need to look out for. Removing unused web resources. If you came from 4.0 to 2011 and you were playing around with 2011, now you went to 2013, I would go and take a look at your web resources and find out what you actually need and don't need, okay? I'll tell you a story. Year before last, I was working on I worked about a 2-year gig out in California, and we were ended up having to kind of refactor what it was written before us because it was kind of written in a hurry, and there was 12,000 lines of hurry. And we end up rewriting it. Well, so I'm working on this for about a month, and I'm going through these things, and I'm just kind of cleaning them up as I go. And I'm out there actually on site one night, and we worked really late. So I just started going through all the web resources, and it just finally occurred to me after a month is, are these actually being used? Because some of them look kind of funny. And when I say funny, it's kind of hard to describe. They just didn't look like they should be there, or maybe they didn't work or something like that. Well, come to find out, I had spent a month working on stuff that over 50% of it wasn't even in production anymore. But the way that they deployed the solution into production was with a managed solution. Well, managed solution does not remove anything when it's installed. It's only an additive process. So what happened is no one ever went and cleaned the stuff up. So we literally had about, out of 75, I think, 75 to 80 web resources, we only had about 35 that were being used, I think. So, and I didn't know that, and I'd already been working on them, so I wasted probably about a month of time, strictly because it never occurred to me that people would leave things in production when they fell out of use, but they did. So you can figure this out by opening the default solution, going to the Web Resources tab, and then highlighting a web resource, and on the toolbar there's a button called Show Dependencies. You click on Show Dependencies, and what you see is the thing on the bottom. It actually has a place where this thing was used. So in this case, it was on the sales form for the account, was where this specific thing was used. Okay. If nothing shows up, there is a 95% chance it's not in use, and you can delete it. When I say 95 instead of 100, I don't know if they fixed this in 2013 or above. I haven't checked in so long. It turns out that if you had a web resource that was connected to a button on a ribbon, it did not fall into the dependencies category, and therefore you could actually delete something that was being used, and you wouldn't know it because it gave you no warning or indication of that. By the way, if you try to delete something that has a dependency on it, it will fail, which is good. The third thing to remember about this, if you've never tried, if you are in a situation where you have a managed solution deployment, you can actually remove web resources from the system by going into the default solution, which is Settings, Customizations, Customize the System. When that box pops up and you see in the top box Solution : Default Solution, you can physically delete web resources from this interface here in production, even though they are inside of a managed solution. Okay?
Mitch, can you take a couple more questions, or do you want to?
Yeah, go ahead.
Later?
Go ahead.
So one question, will the tool that you mentioned fix the window.open references?
No, Transformer will not, Glenn. Basically, it puts a note out beside it that it's what I call a conversion alert. It says, basically, anytime you find a conversion alert, it means you have to fix it by hand. I did everything I possibly could to get around things, but some things are just out of my control. So if I could fix it, I did. If you find a conversion alert, it's because there was no way for me to fix it, but I wanted you to be able to find it quickly. So you just have to look for those, and that will show you. Okay.
And a question, what do you think is the best way to rewrite all SOAP for CRM 2011?
Like I said, I would use the Extreme Service Toolkit. There's actually two versions, which I didn't really know until about 2 months ago. There's the version I showed you, which is XRM SVC Toolkit, and then there's the word service all the way spelled out. They actually came off the same code base, but were maintained by different groups. They almost do exactly the same thing. Their nomenclature is a little bit different. But basically what happens is most of the time you're doing SOAP stuff, in what I've seen is you're doing either a retrieve multiple operation, which retrieves multiple records, or a retrieve operation, which retrieves a single record. And those can all be done with either the retrieve or the retrieve multiple method. So you literally throw away all of the XML, pull out only the fields that you need to go in to request as far as your query goes. You'll have your query parameters as far as fields go, and then you'll get your result set as a different set of fields, and it's just converting from one to the other. So you'll end up with like 10 lines of code out of 100 lines of code. So again, that we can't do that by automation because the variables are too great. There's no consistent way that people write JavaScript, and that causes lots and lots of issues when you're trying to automate something. Okay, anything else?
I am not seeing anything else.
Okay. Oh, sorry, I didn't talk about this. Okay, minification. Go back. Okay. Minification is the process of removing all non-essential non-code elements from your JavaScript. So the CRM team does this. If you've ever looked at any of their JavaScript, it looks like a big, large blob of code. There's no comments. There's no hard returns. There's no spaces in some cases. And what they do is they convert everything into, they take out all the formatting. As I just mentioned, they convert the variable names from like human readable names into like A1, A2, B3, things like that. And the idea is it will download and execute faster because it's a smaller amount of code. The problem with that is it's almost entirely impossible to debug because it's hard to read. It's not the same code that you put into it. So if I had a variable called my variable, it now may be called A. Okay, now A has A.length is not good. Okay, well, where's that at? So if you have a large code base, this can sometimes help. Like I said, it does make your debugging very difficult, if not impossible. The main thing that you need to keep in mind is the way that web browsers and websites work is they will cache the resources locally. So in most cases, you minifying stuff is just an extra set of work that may not give you any benefit at all because of the caching provided by the browser. So what happens is the JavaScript and your web resources, so, images and things are actually cached locally, depends on your browser settings, and the next time you read them, if they haven't changed, they're read from disk instead of from the website. So you can increase the amount of cache that you have to kind of speed things up. That's in the performance white paper that Microsoft puts out, things like that. So Minification is a tool, but it should be used at the last resort. That's my kind of advice on that. Okay, just as kind of a minor note when you're working through things, if you are upgrading your JavaScript and your plugins at the same time, you might want to disable your plugins while you're debugging your JavaScript, because if you're having plugins that have issues, they're going to throw back in your face in many cases and cause your JavaScript to maybe not work the way it should. So during the JavaScript debugging process, you might want to disable or uninstall the plugins so that you can actually do the JavaScript debugging separately. So that has to happen sometimes, because like I said, sometimes depending on where you're upgrading from 4 to 2011, you had to totally rewrite your plugins because it was a different object model, and everything had to be redone and re-registered, and it was a big pain. From 2011 to 2013 to 2015, it's really not that big a deal anymore, so I don't think you will have any issues. I'm working on another 2011 to 2015 upgrade, and I moved from 2011 to 2013 to 2015 and had zero problems with anything anywhere. And I'll talk about a bit about that later. Okay, testing is the most important thing that you will ever do with your system, okay? You need to use real users with real data and actual processes. And I'm pretty sure most of you are going like, I don't have real users or real data and actual processes in my test environment. Well, you need some, because the only way that you're going to figure out if you have bugs in your upgraded code is to have somebody who actually uses a system go through what they do on a daily basis and figure that out. Okay? I really and truly cannot emphasize this enough. This will make your upgrade go much smoother if you don't have to debug in production live. Okay? Okay, a little note down at the bottom. In your test environments, like when you're going from 4 to 2011 to 2013, et cetera, probably a good idea not to have an email router installed. You don't want to be sending stuff out. So no connectivity until the point where you're ready for that type of thing. So if you have an integration with GP, you don't need your GP integration installed in all the test environments in between, just your file environment. But I would test everything and make sure all of your CRM components are working before you introduce any other variables that could complicate things. That's just my take on it. Okay, so all the things that we talked about, what they all boil down to is we have a reduced code base. A reduced code base hopefully means reduced maintenance cost and time. And hopefully it also means a faster user experience. Okay? So, we don't really rate programmers anymore in the amount of lines of code that they can write in an hour or whatever it might be, whatever time frame. But the more code that you have, the more code you have to maintain. And even though some of you may get paid to write code, a lot of you probably don't want to maintain that code once you wrote it. So the idea really and truly is to write as little as possible. Use the facilities they've already built in. Don't jump into a code first operation, because there could be a better, easier way to do it. Things like that. Just keep that in mind. Hang on a second. So a couple years ago, I did two kind of migrations from 4 to 2011 right on top of each other. The first, I had a 49% code reduction. The second, I had about a 30% code reduction, and these were both around 12,000 lines of JavaScript, I think. Medium-sized companies, maybe 15 to 30 people apiece. Okay. The last one I got through doing is I don't actually have real numbers. That was just kind of a guess. I probably reduced about 50% of the code because of the way that the person or people who wrote it. They duplicated a lot of code when they really didn't need to, and then like one thing I think I cut down from around 2,400 lines of code to 300 lines of code because it was all duplicate, and I didn't realize that until I got through cleaning it up, that I'm just doing the same thing and nothing needed to happen. What's fascinating about the first one is, so I had a 49% code reduction. That was the one I just mentioned that I moved from 2011 to 2013 and 2015, and I had 0 problems either importing the organization or having things work. And it's strictly because I took the time to remove all the unsupported code that the previous guy had done, make sure that all the things used, you know, best practices I could come up with at the time, and I was actually shocked. I imported in 2013, opened the website, went to like the account, contact, did some things, and everything's fine. You know, I got no issues on the 2013 prerequisite check. If you didn't know by now, you cannot upgrade a CRM 2011 instance to 2013 unless you have all the CRM 4.0 JavaScript removed. Okay, so it doesn't check for CRM form.all, for instance. If it finds even one of those, it will fail the what they call the environment check, which is that check with the green, the red, and the yellow check boxes that first happens. If it finds any of that stuff, it'll give you a red X and will not let you continue. So you have to have that stuff removed before you can do it. So what I have done in the past regarding that is actually did a backup, killed all of my JavaScript in the system, believe it or not, went and deleted all my JavaScript web resources, and then I upgraded the organization. Now that was not even a test of any automation. What that was to see if my database had any issues. Okay, because what you're going to find when you upgrade this stuff is your database has to be upgraded. 2013 does some amazing things to your database. 2015 does even more things to your database. And you need to make sure all of that works before you even get around to testing your JavaScript. So if your database will not upgrade, and that can happen, it will not upgrade or it fails or something like that, you have to know about that up front. And, you know, before you spend any time working on the JavaScript, you just got to answer the question, will this database upgrade? And the only way you're going to do that is to just rip out all the JavaScript. So, something to think about. I have a series of upgrade tips. Basically, it's a lot of the things we've talked about here today. I put a bunch of them up as blog posts. I'm about halfway done. But a lot of other things that I have out there are also available, just things that I notice as I'm going through upgrading code. I see patterns that people do all over the place. One of them is the equal sign assigns a variable, a value. So if you say my variable equals 10 is one thing. If you put the equal sign inside of an if statement where it should have been a double equal sign, it will not check to see if it is equal to 10. It will say it is equal to 10. And it changes, the JavaScript lets you do this. This is a perfect legal operation. It's wrong, but it's legal. And the problem is you don't know that. And I have actually caught code that was in production. In one case, it was in production for 7 years, and it never worked right. And I had to tell the project manager when I got finished or before I implemented it, said, okay, I fixed this bug, and it's been working this specific way for 7 years. It's no longer going to work this way. It's going to work the way they want it to work. And you have to tell them that if this is not the way they want it, we can put it back to what they had before. Okay, but again, it's just one of those deals. So Glenn has a question. Glenn, there's not an automated way to find unused web resources. You have to actually write an application to do that. So yeah, unfortunately, that's about it. Basically, the dependency thing is actually an SDK function. So you pass it what you're looking at or for, and you ask, are there any dependencies on this thing? And it will give you back a list of things. So it's a programmatic thing you have to do. Okay, so I have some free tools here. Export JavaScript is something I wrote a long time ago. Export web resources, the web resource manager. This one here, the JS web resource manager, that may, I think he actually rolled everything into his extra toolbox which we'll probably have a link if you go there. That is an excellent set of tools. He has various things to allow you to pull web resources out, edit them, and push them back in again, totally free. The External Service Toolkit, like I was telling you, that's there. Oh, I think I missed my main tools. No, then. I use ReSharper, again, for my development. CodeRush is also a good product. ReSharper is great. It's better for C# development than JavaScript, but it does have some JavaScript things that it does that are useful. It's fairly inexpensive. It's a couple $100. Well, you know, you can make that in a day quite easily with all the time and trouble it saves you. Last thing I want to talk about, which is technically not part of your JavaScript conversion, but it's something that you kind of have to take into consideration, is actually the new form model that's built into 2013 and above. So in 2011, our main form was called information. 2013 and above, the main form is in 17 cases, I think it's 17 entities. The main form is actually called the name of the entity, like account or contact or lead, etc. It's a different form model. So the way that they put the form together, the way they render it is different. It is also very much faster than the information form for some reason. So when you are working with an upgraded organization and you have an information form available to you, if you were on the other form, there will be a Merge Forms button that will be active. And when you merge the forms, what it will do is it will take the information form and tack it to the bottom of the entity form. And then from there, you can make a decision about where you want to put it. So what it will do is it'll put all the fields in there, and you really kind of have to play with this a little bit to kind of understand how the process works. But the idea is the entity forms are Microsoft's official path into the future. Okay, they've said that on a couple of occasions they kind of backtrack every now and then that the information forms are no longer going to be supported. They look different. They look like CRM 2011 and 4.0. They don't function the same way with as the flow layout of the new forms, like for mobile devices and tablets, etc. So you need to sooner or later figure out how to get your information form into your entity form. Now, a lot of times that is harder to do than it is to say. You'll read, there's several stories about the horrors of somebody doing that, and next thing you know, they've got these very strange error messages, and it has to do with duplicate IDs and all kinds of strange stuff. The really thing you have to watch out for before you merge them is, do you need to merge them? Okay. And the only way you know that is you actually look at the two forms side by side. It's like, okay, here's the new way of doing it. Here's the fields I had in the old form. Is there anything in the old form that I actually need to move over to the new form? If there's a few things, I would not merge. I would just add them by hand. If it's a lot of things, you're going to probably have to do a merge and then put them in, just move things around and delete tabs and sections as you need. The biggest problem you have with that is if there's JavaScript involved, the JavaScript will get imported properly and is still attached to the fields the way they were. You just have to make sure you don't delete them, otherwise you're going to have an issue, of course. But the idea I think you need to kind of keep in your mind is, do I really need to merge these, or can I just start over? It's kind of like the whole model of moving the database over. So in some cases, like today, I've got to go merge some forms and the same process. They've got a few things that they've done. It's nothing major. I can replicate it. It's a minor amount of JavaScript. It's maybe 2 or 3 fields are automated. I can do that by hand. Okay. There are things that you can do after you merge a form, and unfortunately, you can't undo them. Like certain fields you can't remove and things like that. So just kind of be kind of careful there. So I'm going to have a blog post out about some things to keep out for here shortly. Kind of some things I learned, and I'll try to document this a little bit more. Okay. Any questions on anything now? I know we covered a lot, so now's your time.
All right, we have a question from Kim.
Hi, Kim. Yes, you can pick which form you want to merge. So basically, like I said, say you're on account. You have the account form open. The merge form button will be active. You click on that, it'll pop up a dialog box with the information form in it. You pick the information form or forms. You'll pick one at a time, and it will merge in at the bottom of the account form. So you do them one at a time, to my knowledge. So speaking, oh sorry, go ahead. Let me say something. So speaking of that, how many people have multiple forms for an entity? Are there a lot of people? Just put in the chat window if you have. Nobody?
So you might not be seeing all of these. There's one that one person said no, but I don't think you saw it.
Okay.
A couple others come in here, yeah.
Okay. So the question I have for you is the maintenance cost that you had to do with that worth the extra effort of creating the form?
And just for the folks in the audience who can't see that, we had a no and a couple of yeses. All right.
Okay. Yeah, I think your mileage is going to absolutely vary, but a lot of times you really have got to look at why you're creating multiple forms. I had the situation where we created 2 forms. We had no reason to create 2 forms. They just did it. There was only one section of data difference between the 2. It wasn't a security issue, and it was an abso-freaking-lutely maintenance nightmare with just 2 forms. Other people have, you know, it sounds like are working pretty well. I have another tool that generates documentation I call Snapshot. One of my customers is in Europe, and he asked me about making a modification one day, and he's explaining they had 249 forms on one entity. And I was like, that worked? I didn't think it worked. But yeah, they had to do some custom things behind the scenes to actually make it not overwhelm the system, but they actually had that many. So again, you can use multiple forms. You got to be very careful not to overwhelm yourself because your JavaScript can be different. All kinds of fancy things can go on, and it just be careful is all I got to say. Okay, Jason, anything else?
Yeah, so there's another question here. Are there any blogs or forums you recommend for talking more about SOAP? This is a main issue because we have about 60 scripts referencing SOAP 2 that need to be updated, and he doesn't have a lot of experience with the technology.
You know, you're going to find examples all over the place about how to use that. Most of them are older because we have different technologies now that we utilize, starting with 2011. So most of the references you're going to find, there's not really any good references about, you know, moving them from one technology to the other. I mean, I kind of mentioned it in a couple of my blog posts. I don't think I've done a comprehensive one saying this is how you move stuff over. Maybe I need to do that. Make it a little bit easier. But yeah, definitely, if you're not a developer and you don't understand the XML and the SOAP stuff like that, you are definitely going to be at a disadvantage over somebody who knows it. I mean, if you know, it's not hard to rewrite, but if you don't understand what you're looking at, I can understand it's going to be overwhelming.
Mitch, a side note here, a couple of folks have asked during the session about access to the slide deck today. We are recording today's session, but do you have a policy on that?
I generally don't give it out, but it's in the recording.
Okay, great. And I figured they can, follow up if you have specific questions.
Yeah, you can follow me. And like I said, everything I'm putting in the slide deck is going to be on my blog within the next month or so. Most of it's already there. I just got busy with the holidays and had to stop doing the posts. But I'm 3/4 of the way through with actually writing all this stuff out, plus there's a bunch of other stuff. So just go out to my CRMaccelerators.net site and go to the blog, and you'll see all the things I've written. Anything else?
I'm not seeing any other questions, so we can start wrapping up, maybe make a last call. Oh, Convergence, are you going to be there?
Yeah, I should be, Steve. So you going to be there again? Cool. Yeah, I've got, I don't know, one or two, I think, MVP roundtable type things. Hopefully I'm working on the Microsoft booth, so I'll be there. And otherwise, just wandering around Atlanta.
Very good. Hopefully I can run into you there as well, Mitch, and see what you're talking about, what you're discussing with other folks there.
Okay.
Great. Well, I believe that's the end of our question queue. We'll start wrapping up and make a last call here. Well, first of all, Mitch, I just want to say thank you very much for taking the time today to speak to the folks on the line, answer so many questions, share so much knowledge with us.
Sure, no problem at all.
All right, like I said, we have recorded today's session. We'll be making that available very soon on our site through our YouTube channel. Thanks again, and have a great day.
Okay, thanks, Jason. Bye.
Thanks, Mitch.